If you're a person that is considering consulting as a business, or maybe you have a consulting business and you just feel like you need to pivot and do something different, then hopefully today's show will be helpful to you because we're going to talk about ways to find your area of expertise and really kind of the proof of concept around what is most viable for you to do that. So we'll unpack all of that throughout the show today. Take a listen. Hello and welcome to the Productize or Perish podcast, where creativity meets strategy and ideas turn into revenue. I'm your host, Greg Davis, founder of Azola Creative. And each week we focus on discovering new and creative product marketing strategies. We like to use real world examples from success stories from people like you, as well as others in the industry. And we like to share new and creative ways that you can dominate in your market. Now, this week's quote is I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious by Albert Einstein. And we're going to talk about finding our special talents today, really recognizing what it is that is truly a unique value proposition for ourselves. Because a lot of experts, call it experts, call it subject matter experts, just people that, have a lot of expertise in industry. Sometimes when they go into their own business, they might go down the route of doing consulting, which is pretty common. And the challenge is finding your exact niche in that type of world. So today we're going to talk a little bit more just specifically around the consulting industry because that is, I think, one of the most common areas where people start. Now, sometimes that consulting business turns into something else. It turns into something much bigger. Maybe it's just completely goes down a different path. Sometimes it leads to a new job. There's all kinds of different ways and paths that consulting could take you. But I want to kind of share with you some of my own experiences as well as just things I've seen over the years when it comes to people that are trying to understand kind of what it is that they are really good at or really great at. And kind of, as Dan Miller used to say, the zone of genius, where you're just completely in your element and it's bringing out all of the best of you. So we're gonna dig into that today. Now, before we get started, just warn you, I I had the worst cold. This flu that's been going around the country is just crazy. And I had the flu and it turned into a respiratory cold after that that has just been really hard for me to shake. So I may have a little bit of coughing. I'll try to mute that if at all possible, but just letting you know, not to be rude, but sometimes it just kind of comes out of nowhere. So we'll dig in and let's get started. Now, I'm going to, excuse me, there we go. There's first coughs. Um, I'm going to talk about kind of first my own experience in this world because this was one of my own challenges for the longest time. And so that way it kind of gives you a little bit of context around where my perspective comes from when it comes to this idea of developing kind of your unique value. So, you know, I am surrounded by friends and colleagues that are entrepreneurs. And it's interesting because on paper, I think there's a correlation here. I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that probably were not on the highest academic track. Let's just say it that way. And I'll include myself in that completely. I was not a person who I hated school, to be honest with you. I just hated school. And I couldn't wait to get out. It was just a complete uh, I don't know, just drag for me, where it's like I just felt impatient about it and didn't enjoy it. And a lot of my friends and some colleagues I have a similar story. I have friends that and people I've worked for before who didn't graduate high school. They dropped out and maybe got their GED, but like they dropped out of school and some struggled really hard with getting through school. And I'm talking about, like up through high school, not even including college, but just through high school years, just struggled with it for one way or the other. And these are people that are not, by any stretch of the imagination, they're not unintelligent, they're not uneducated, but just their form of education came of a different journey. I think there are some people that are very academic in that they learn from the books. They like the structure of school, they like the pace of it and the way that they learn things. And I think that that works great for some people. And maybe the majority of people, I don't know. I don't know what the math would actually be percentage wise. But then I think there's the others out there that just are more into kind of a do-it-yourself kind of learning pace. They like to just get in and tinker with things. They like to figure things out for themselves. And I have found that, and again, this is anecdotal, but I have found a lot more of the entrepreneurs I know are kind of in that second bucket of just being the ones that weren't necessarily the most academic in school as far as they didn't fit the mold of what the ideal student would be, but they've gone on to be very successful running their own business. Now, I'm sure, again, there are plenty of entrepreneurs, I'm sure, that are on the other side of that table, but just maybe I gravitate towards my own kind, and maybe that's what it is. But it's just something to kind of first understand if you're a person out there who is contemplating starting your own business, or maybe you've tried it before and it didn't work out, and you're like, well, maybe I just don't have the brains for it. Like, it's not that. It is not that, because we're all in our own unique ways completely viable to be able to do something really cool, something really interesting and impressive. It's just a matter of finding the right way that it fits for us. And I think that when you grow up in largely academic kind of communities, and you're not that academic person, you're not the one that's like 100% in school and getting straight A's and things like that. I think that it can be hard because sometimes you think, well, maybe there's something wrong with me that I just don't get it. Like people will have a complex of just feeling dumb or inadequate or some whatever it is. And even in society, I mean, like I remember years ago, because now I'll tell you the college part. I did some college just because I was like, well, maybe I'm wrong and I'll just do college. Now, college was better. I enjoyed it a little bit more because I think I was just more mature and into the idea of learning. But I will tell you, I did not finish college because I just didn't like the pace of it. It drove me crazy, how slow it felt trying to go through it. And I was just more about like, I just want to get out there and kind of do it and figure it out myself. But that being said, it's funny because there are some who put so much weight on the education part as far as they need to see that degree. They need to see that whatever it is, that certification or degree or whatever, to make them feel confident about even hiring somebody. And I've run into that where I've had opportunities completely pulled from under me, and I was told it's because I didn't have the education, which was, again, I believe very short-sighted, because the reality is that people that are in any industry, you go to school for something, unless it's a really special thing, like, if you're learning, obviously, something that might be like legal or medical, or even in, say, the teaching industry, where there are very specific things you need to do. So there's obviously areas where college is the only path, because that's just the way it has to be. But I think there's also a lot out there where people, like, they get a degree, in whatever, in marketing or psychology or whatever it is. It doesn't make them a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist. It doesn't make them necessarily any more qualified to do marketing than someone else. It's what you learn on the job in many cases that matter. So I think that that is one of the first things to kind of get over. If that is a stigma for you around the idea, I didn't go to college, great. I think if you didn't go to college, you might actually be on a better path, because you probably have something in you that is highly spirited around trying to figure things out and make something of it, kind of on your own. Now, that might be sometimes to your disadvantage, because look, I think that it helps to learn from others. So hopefully you get an opportunity where you get to learn from others. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're just kind of thrown into it and it's kind of sink or swim. Again, everybody kind of has their own level of how they can compete in that kind of space. But first things first, just knowing, look, let's let education, or let's say formal education, is not the factor here. Uh, you can be educated all kinds of different ways. Now, the next point that I'm going to point to myself again, I'm sorry, I kind of went off on a little bit of a rabbit hole talking about that, but to get off of my soapbox there is going back to myself. So again, I am surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurs, and the thing is a lot of my friends that are entrepreneurs, they had like a physical product. They have a physical product that they're selling that might be kind of common in the business or in any industry. I have a friend that runs restaurants. I have a friend and his wife who make jewelry, and I've got a friend who runs a printing business, and they've all been highly successful with what they do. But for me, I was kind of like, I had a little bit of a harder time trying to figure out some of my own expertise because I thought I don't have a physical product. I mentioned this before, even though I really cut my teeth in the digital marketing space, excuse me, doing e-commerce, I never really had a desire to have a retail store. I didn't, I dabbled with the idea of making my own product as far as like a physical product, but it just wasn't something that I really had a lot of passion for. And so it was kind of hard for me to figure out like what is it I can actually sell. And even years ago, I had an e-commerce business with a really good friend of mine, and we were doing e-commerce development for other companies, developing their website or whatever. And I largely took care of kind of the sales and marketing of the business and a little bit of the project management, working with the clients. And he was more of the programmer, and we had a designer that we worked with, and it was really great work. But it still kind of came down to what exactly do I do in the sense of if I'm going to sell some expertise, what is that? And so I went through definitely some ups and downs of trying to figure it out because one of the hard parts about being a person that kind of just goes out there and figures it out is you can tinker yourself into oblivion because you're just so busy learning how to do things. And now it's even more with like YouTube and stuff like that. You can be an expert in just about anything in a few hours, it feels like. So it's easy to just go out there and kind of become a do-it-yourself person, but that can be a challenge because you can just never run out of room. It's like again going back to college. It's like people that never graduate from college. They just keep majoring in more and more things because it's almost like college is their career. And so I think the same thing can happen to the tinkering people who are just trying to figure a lot of things out. So what I had to kind of really get down to was understanding not only what is it I'm good at that maybe I feel like I'm an expert in that I can help people with, but also what is it that I want to be able to do? Because sometimes what you know how to do isn't necessarily what you should be doing. Just because you know it doesn't mean it's something that you're going to have passion about. So I think it's like figuring out what it is you're an expert in, but then also figuring out what you would actually enjoy doing. What would you do every day that makes you feel like you're not even at work? And I think for most business owners, that is the dream. It's you just never want it to feel like it's work. And I know for myself, because I have finally found the things that I feel good at and I feel like I can help people with, it's very rare that I worry about Monday. Sometimes I don't even want Friday to come because I just want to keep working, which again can lead to burnout. But the reality is, like, sometimes it just doesn't feel like work. And on Sunday nights, I remember years ago when I worked for companies, I would get that sick to my stomach kind of feeling on a Sunday night because I just did not want to have to go in on Monday morning. I don't have that anymore. And it's funny though, there are times when I'm working on certain kinds of projects that are not necessarily the exact right fit for what it's a project I had the best of intentions hoping it was going to be a good thing, but then maybe it's just not the right fit. I feel that tension come in on Sunday nights for myself where I'm like, oh, I gotta go do this on Monday. And that is where I know I need to make a change. And there have been times where in working with clients, that I've told them, I just don't think that this is the exact fit anymore. And maybe it was at first, but just kind of outgrew it, or just felt like we kind of ran to a point where there's nowhere else to go together. And I feel like there might be somebody else that can help them and do it better. And I'll try to transition them to someone who can help them. But that happens. And so that's kind of my little filter or sensor that I've learned to recognize myself is that when I start feeling really tense and start getting kind of aggravated or short-tempered or having that like kind of just feeling on a Sunday night, I usually know it's probably because there's a project that I'm working on that I need to make a change in and how I'm addressing it. Might be my approach on the project. Doesn't mean I have to get rid of the project, just might mean I need to change the approach. So I am speaking to you from complete awareness that this is a difficult road because we're really trying to unscramble the things that are in our mind. We have picked up all of these skills over the years, all this different stuff that we know how to do. Plus, there's things that we just feel like we would like to do. But there's another filter that we have to run all that through, and that is what is actually viable as a product or service or company. Now, again, years ago, I was doing a lot of different things that I was offering to people. This is when I was kind of transitioning out of e-commerce. I was still doing some of it, excuse me, but I was trying to kind of move away from it just because I had reached a point where it just didn't enjoy it anymore. And I started doing a lot of different things. I was producing podcasts for people. I was doing all kinds of different design work. I was doing writing for some people. It was just a lot of different stuff. And I think it was a little bit of that. I was a little bit lost in, well, what do I do next? And so I was kind of just doing all these things I knew how to do. And some of them I really enjoyed. But I was asked this question that I thought was a really great question. And I'm going to ask you to think about this in the way that you're thinking about your own business. Um, the question simply is, how can you turn what you're doing into $1 million business? And I really gave that a lot of thought. And I went through and looked at the pricing and the numbers of what I would have to really build from a clientele in order to turn this into $1 million business. And because of that, I recognized I needed to get rid of some things. There were just some things that I was doing that were in the way. They were fun and I had passion for it, but the scalability that I needed to make it hit that $1 million mark, it just wasn't in the cards for me. And maybe that was at the time, and maybe if I did it something differently now, it'd be a different answer. But I had to really cut down a lot of the things I was doing because I realized I was doing too much. I was spreading my expertise too thin and really not honing in on the things that I could do really well. And so by recognizing that, it was a big change for my business. I, the reality is like less is more. And we all say this and intellectually we say, yeah, you need to niche down. You need to be the smaller you are, the as far as like your focus, the more you'll grow. But it's really hard to do. It's really hard to accept that, but it is something that you have to do. It's really just nailing it down to some very small details around what you know how to do. And when you get there, it starts to take off. And so I experienced that completely from going through, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 different things that I was offering and whittling it down to maybe 1 to 3 things that I did as a consultant. And that really was a big game changer for me. Now, I still miss some of those things, and sometimes I do it just for the fun of it if I have the bandwidth, but I have learned to say no to things that I shouldn't do. Um, so that is what I'm going to ask you to be thinking about as a result of what we're talking about today is I need you to do a few things for me. That this is something you can just do it on a piece of paper for yourself or on a notepad, whatever it is, do it on your phone, whatever you feel most comfortable about. Is I'm going to give you kind of the directions of what you should do. The first thing is I need you to just make a list of all of the skills you have. These could be some things like, maybe you're good at managing projects. Maybe you're good at leading teams. Maybe you're good at solving really complex problems. Maybe you're really good at Excel. Maybe you're really good at PowerPoint. Maybe you're a really good writer, or maybe you're not that great of a writer, but you're a really good editor or kind of wordsmith for other people's works. Just anything that you can think of that you are good at, write it down. And then from there, what you need to do is you need to look at kind of what is, excuse me, sorry, my throat keeps drying out on me. I need you to look at the things that you are an expert in as far as subject matter expert. So you may have these skills that you can do, but now let's look at what you actually are able to do when it comes to just you have some really good expertise in these areas. Again, it could be management. It could be you're really good developing you're writing up grants, proposals. Maybe you're really good at something again, maybe in the marketing space. Maybe it's in just something, healthcare, whatever it is. Just make a list of the things that you feel that you could really hold your own on when it comes to discussing those subjects, guiding people, being able to provide them really solid advice that you feel comfortable around, that they would listen to you. You don't want to be in a situation where, you're giving just kind of half-hearted advice because you're just a little familiar with it. The things that you really just know hands down, you can give people really good instruction on where to go. All right, so you kind of break down that list. But now the final thing is trying to kind of reconcile those first two categories. The things that you are good at from a just skill set, the things that you feel you are an expert in from a industry expertise standpoint. And now let's find out how you can apply that into whatever business you would have from a consulting standpoint. Again, this is where the product is your expertise that you're going to provide people, but it's not necessarily that you're just going to be a worker bee possibly, but maybe it's more as a consultant, you really need to be able to guide people in a certain direction. And what is it that's out there that you have a very unique perspective on? And because of the skills you have, now again, you don't have to do everything just because you know how to do it. Doesn't mean you have to do all of it. But what are some of the skills that you could apply? What are some of the just knowledge base that you could pass along to people that you would just feel really confident that if they listen to you on this, they could be successful? It's funny. A lot of times we're all guilty of this. It's easier for us to tell other people how they should live their life than it is for us to figure out how to live our own life. And as a consultant, that's kind of how it is sometimes from a business standpoint. You just have there's a gap that a client might have, and you just happen to fit that exact expertise, and you can jump in there and you can help them bridge that gap. And those are some of the best opportunities for consultants because the reality is that sometimes companies aren't looking to hire an employee. They don't need a full-time employee. This is just a kind of a stopgap issue. They need somebody who can help guide them through to the next step and get them to the next level. And so that is where the role of a consultant can come in very, very helpful. But you have to figure out, excuse me, you have to figure out what that role you're going to play is. And is it viable? Is there enough demand for it that people are looking for it? And one of the best ways to figure this out is I just like to look at job searches. I like to go out there and see what job postings. So if I have an idea of what I'm thinking maybe this thing is, I'll do job searches to see are there people out there hiring for this position to do this kind of work. Because if there's a company out there hiring a position that's similar to what you're trying to do, then you know that there's a need. And again, many companies will have budgets that are they can contract people out, but they may not necessarily be able to hire somebody full time. That's where the consultant comes in. So if you're seeing job postings out there for something that you want to do, then there's likelihood that there are a lot of people out there that are looking for that person, but they can't look for them in a hiring situation. So it can really help you kind of understand the demand that they might have for that. So I like to think that everything I do is kind of I've created the job I want, and I try to match it to what is out there that people recognize. So and here's what I mean by this. There's a lot of language that we use sometimes on our own that might be a little too close to the hip. We have a tendency to be overly clever instead of just being really clear and concise about what it is we do because we feel like we have to give it this name. Everything has to have this name like side hustle. First of all, I hate that expression. Uh, but like instead of it just being, hey, you got a side job, it's a side hustle. And so it's like we give these clever names to just make something sound, different, cool, whatever. But the reality is that sometimes you're cutting off your opportunities because you're trying to be too clever. And you just need to say what it is that you do. And that's why the job description is one of the best filters for me in trying to help people figure this stuff out, is because see what the job title is. What's the job title? What are the job descriptions for the things it is that you're trying to do? If you can nail it like that, then you're putting together a better pitch for how to sell yourself as a consultant. If you can think of it as though you're going to do a cover letter and a resume for that job, but that's actually your business, it's your consulting business, I think you're going to be in a much better place because you're matching the market where it is and you're using the language that other companies are using to go out there and find it. So this may or may not be helpful for you. I hope that if you're kind of one of those people that are struggling with where do I go from here? I need to make a change, to do something different. Then I'm hoping that this will actually have an impact for you. Now, I will mention to you, I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to talk to you really briefly about disc profiles because I think that they're one of the better tools out there, better assessments out there when it comes to learning how to communicate better with others, especially as a consultant, when you're trying to think about who it is you're talking to, how do you communicate with them? If you're using the DISC assessment, you're understanding how to talk to a high D personality or a high I or a high S or a high C. You're understanding the kind of language, the kind of detail or lack of detail that you need to put into the way that you communicate with people. This can again be helpful for you when you're applying some of the language around, you're looking at job descriptions, and now you might understand okay, I understand better how to position myself, but now how do I communicate with the right kinds of people when it comes to trying to sell myself? And so if you go to azolacreative.com/disc, on there you'll find a few different disc assessments that you can do. One is around a marketing assessment, kind of helping you as a marketer become a better communicator. One is around sales and helping you become better at the way that you would actually position and sell yourself. And then there's also just a self-assessment. So the first two give you an opportunity to meet with someone that will go over your disc assessment with you and kind of give you some guidance on how to apply it. Or you could just do the assessment independently. Again, you're that DIY person. You just want to kind of have the information and take from it and learn from it on your own. No wrong way to do it. Obviously, I prefer when people do more of a guided version where someone can kind of take them through it because it might help to bounce some ideas. But there's really no wrong way as long as you're just trying to leverage DISC as a way to communicate better with other people. And so again, go to azolacreative.com/disc and you can check those out. All right, so again, I'm just gonna wrap it up here, and I appreciate you holding out and listening despite my cold, as well as hopefully I wasn't too disoriented in the way I spoke today. But your homework for the week is to make that list. Find out what it is that you feel like you're good at, your special skills that you're good at. What are the areas, industry areas that you have a lot of expertise in that you feel like you could really be a great guide to help people move to the next level? And then what's viable? What's out there from a job description standpoint that people are hiring for? What's out there from a demand? Even using SEO as a idea, like, what are people searching for? What are people looking for when it comes to the type of expertise that you offer? Use that as an instrument for you to be able to try to find kind of your unique value proposition or your zone of genius, where you know that when you're in this realm, you're going to have fire in your belly, you're going to do a great job and really, really make a difference in the way that you help people. If you do that, you're going to be well on your way. All right, so thank you again for listening. As always, if you like the show, want to help out in spreading the word, please follow or comment on the podcast. As well as if you have any questions or comments you want to make, you can go to azolacreative.com/podcast and submit some information there. Otherwise, I hope that this is helpful for you and you start to kind of sort this stuff out if you are in the consulting zone or at least thinking about the consulting zone. And again, if feel free to reach out with questions. Again, go to the azolacreative.com/podcast. And if you have questions around consulting, things that could be done, ideas on what you're trying to do, feel free to submit there and I'd be happy to comment on it. So have a good week, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you.